Hello, welcome to ECO-595, Applied Physics Research. In this lecture, we're going to go over Chapter 2, Information Systems and Knowledge Management. Let's first start with an example, and this time we're going to talk about UPS, United Parcel Service. I'm sure everybody knows something about UPS, and I believe all of us have ever used UPS at least once so far. So UPS apparently specialized in delivering packages worldwide. Actually, according to the 2010 data, UPS delivers about 4 billion packages each year, right? And it delivers inside the United States, but also to the world, right? Now, one question remains is how could UPS combine global service with local delivery? One thing you notice is sometimes a package was initially delivered by UPS and then at the final stage it's transited to local post office and eventually you will receive it from local post office, right? And also UPS needs to track a package all the time. If we have the tracking number, we can all go online and to track the package. We will know when this package will be delivered and we will also have an estimate. Usually such estimate is quite accurate. So how could UPS do that? Apparently they need to do data management. Now they could collect data on every package delivery, and they ultimately need to manage such data to serve for their purpose. In fact, UPS invests over $1 billion a year in technology investment. Okay, so that means they take technology seriously, and what they do is they want to invest into data analysis, data management to better serve the customers. Of course, this will bring more profits for UPS. Okay. Now they do have one system that will integrate data collection and management all together at every level of service, and this system will manage all data collected by UPS, right? And that way, UPS could ensure that they have the package delivered on time at the right place. Now, in this chapter, actually, we're going to talk about data, information, and intelligence in more detail. Let's start with data. Now, data is the most fundamental level. They are facts or recorded measures of certain phenomena, things, or events. Now, I have a comment about data. Actually, data are plural. Okay, this word is plural, but sometimes people treat it as singular, which is fine. There's no strict way to say data must be plural or data must be singular. But for me, actually, I usually refer data as plural. So data are facts. Usually when we talk about data, right, we think about numbers. Actual data can include more than numbers. We could talk about categories and they are still data. We could talk about different models of cars in the dealership. That is data. We could talk about words. They are data. We could say we do data mining in social media posts. And with those, we will be able to figure out, well, what teenagers are talking about these days. What kind of brand of cosmetics people like the most. Okay, so that's also data. Now the next level will be information. Information are data formatted to support decision making or define relationship between two facts. Okay, that's the next level. So you organize data in a certain way so that it presents something to you. Now, when you look at the raw data, okay, data collected from what you observe or from sometimes the retailer data collected through checkout, that's just facts. It's not organized. Once you organize the data in a certain format and from that format, you can derive something that's called information. The highest level is market intelligence. Okay, that's the subset of data and information that actually has some explanatory power, enabling effective decisions to be made. And usually, market intelligence is generated by researchers. So researchers gather data and information, they analyze the data, and they will be able to come up with something that will help management to make decisions. Okay, so it's higher than information. It's just not formatting the data. It includes analyzing the data using more advanced tools. Okay, let's take a look at another example so that I can show you what we mean or the relationship between data, information, and intelligence. Let's take Home Depot, for example. Right? So think about Home Depot. There are thousands of stores throughout the United States. Now, apparently for Home Depot, they're going to collect tons of data. And to store, organize, and analyze the data they have, they may need a data depot, right? So what they do is actually they outsource such data collection and management to IBM. IBM manages data for Home Depot. What IBM does is they collect data from cash registers, time clock, shelf counts, and all other aspects of store. They compile it, they analyze it, and they feed into some automatic management system, which we'll talk about later. Such management system could be decision support system. We're going to talk about in a few slides. They feed data automatically into such systems so management can make a decision automatically, or they actually sometimes analyze data and support and supply a research report to kind of deliver the intelligence they've got from analyzing the data, right? So the process will be at the very beginning, right? When we as customers purchase the data, purchase product, that is recorded as data by the scanner. Okay, so it says today, me as a customer purchased these products at this time in this local store. That is recorded as fact and they are data. Okay, the next step is such facts or data will be fed into a system, and the system organizes the data. One of them is to manage inventory. So data are automatically feed into the system. The system will keep track of the inventory to allow the manager to determine whether it's points to reorder some product. Okay, so that's information. It's organized from the raw data, and management could use it for certain decisions. Manager could decide, oh, this is the time we order the product because of the low inventory. So that system will automatically tell the manager it's time for reorder. Once, of course, someone needs to set this system up. Now, the next step involves researcher, okay? Because this is not automatic. It requires the researcher to conduct deeper research, okay? So the researcher could analyze the data to answer certain questions. It could be what type of trends exist in consumer purchases, and also is there any difference across different regions, right? And such intelligence cannot be generated automatically. So we do need a researcher to sit down, analyze the data to get the conclusion. Such analysis could also help stores to determine whether they should open a new store in a new location. Okay, so that's the relationship between these three terms: data, information, and intelligence. Right. Now, in terms of information, okay, some of them are some of the information is valuable, some of the information may not be so useful. So there are four basic characteristics that we look at to determine whether the information or the data we have is valuable or not. The first one is relevant. So this is quite easy to understand, right? You're gonna need to have, if you're looking at consumer preference, apparently you wouldn't want to look at the employment side. You don't want to look at the benefits of employees. That's irrelevant. So the information or the data you have must be relevant to the topic you are looking at. And second is quality, right? Of course, we want high quality data. And you might wonder, well, under what condition we will have not so good data or low quality data? Well, if you think about it, there are situations where data are collected manually. It's not through scanner, okay? It's manually collected. Like surveys, if you conduct interviews to collect data, then the interviewer could make a mistake, right, when entering the data. And if such mistake accumulates to a certain extent, then we will say the data is not of high quality. So that's what we're talking about in terms of quality. Timeliness, of course, we want data to be current. If we're talking about sales for a retailer and you give me the data 2 years ago, right? That's old data. And that data definitely is not timely, right? There could be new trend. There could be substantial change over the 2 years. Lastly, we want the information to be complete. That is, if we analyze something, we need data from all aspects that we look at. Now, for example, say Toyota is or Ford is considering to build a production line or production factory in a new location, right? Now, apparently, this company needs to conduct certain analysis to determine whether it's a good decision or not. And at least they need to know whether they will have enough labor supply in that region, okay? Now, they will definitely need some macro data such as population statistics, GDP in the region, maybe employment rate in the region, and education level also matters, right? So if we don't have one of such variables in hand, right? That is what we mean by incomplete information, because you do need all of them to make better decision. In such cases, usually the company will conduct their own survey to collect data. Now, in terms of business research, okay, there are several functions business research can help make better decisions. Before I've talked about two directions. One is the company is facing an issue. The other direction is the company is facing new opportunity. Now, there's another way to look at business research. And one of the main functions for business research is really to monitor performance. Okay. And from this perspective, business research helps management to determine about its profitability and delivery time, for example, or it could provide real-time management. Like I said, the inventory system could track the sales and inventory and prompt the manager to order new inventory when the inventory level is low enough. It could also help us with what if of policy changes. What if I increase employee benefits? What if I provide more trainings? Of course, such changes are costly, but then the company needs to know whether it's worthwhile or not. So business research could help that situation as well, right? Now, one of the systems I was talking about earlier was the decision support system, right? And this allows the manager to interact with databases and analytical software programs automatically. This is because for companies, they've already have such programs set up and data are fed into the system automatically. So for the manager, it's probably just several clicks to get the result they want. That's the decision support system. Among the decision support system, one important system is called the consumer relationship management system. Okay, it's called CRM system. I'm sure some of you are familiar with that and some of you may already use it. But with this system, it actually kind of address the exchanges between the firm and customers. Basically, it tracks the customer's behavior very closely so that the management could know better about the consumer's preference, the trend, the sales, and the management could better serve the customers. Of course, better service means better revenue. And speak of that, maybe when you surf the internet, at one point you open the web page and suddenly you find there is a advertisement window. It shows something you are interested currently, right? Something you just searched before. And that is also related to CRM, Consumer Relationship Management System. This is because the website are tracking our behaviors all the time, okay? Maybe you were thinking about a vacation trip and then suddenly you receive an email saying that, let's say 12 Less Day is giving a promotion about this vacation package and you were like, oh, this is just the right timing. But then you didn't realize they were able to target you. Not everybody will receive such emails actually. They targeted you based on your behavior, based on your search on the internet. Okay? So that's basically what this example was talking about. That is, websites could predict consumers' behavior because they track us. Of course, as consumers, right, we could to a certain extent control what they want, what we want them to know. Okay, we could determine whether we want to enter data or block certain data from being transmitted, but not all the time, I have to say, right? At least when you use Google, right? Google will track what pages you go, how long you stay there, all the details about our behavior using their search engine. Now, I'm going to skip this slide. It's called databases and data warehousing. Basically, it's talking about how data are stored, how they are formatted, but that's really too much detail for our course. And same here, input management talk about how data are recorded. And that's also the example about how data are recorded. Same home people. One thing I want to mention is that although when we talk about data, you may think about, well, I'm going to collect my own data. Well, that's fine, but I still want you to be aware that we do have data wholesalers. And as researchers, at least for us, as when we write academic research, we use data from those wholesalers a lot because they compile important information about business, and it's very convenient for us to retrieve data from one wholesaler about the whole industry or about every aspect about the company. So here's the list. If you're interested, take a look. We'll not go through the list in very much details. One thing I want to mention is the last one, Bloomberg Financial Markets. And the reason being that in my department, Eco and Finance, we do have this database such that if students or professors want some financial data, they could come to the department to retrieve the data from the system. It's a very powerful system that provides various financial reports and financial data for a lot of companies. There are also several databases that worth talking. The first one is the statistical databases. And such databases usually provide data for analysis and forecasting. Forecasting actually is a very important component for business, right? So statistical databases enables the researchers to do some forecasting because it provides demographic information, and it also includes some sales. Of course, this is not the detailed sales information. It could be the aggregate sales information. So the next one will be financial databases, and this is especially important for financial managers, right? If you want to know about your competitors' financial data, if you want to know something about consumers' financial data, then that's where you want to go. And of course, one example is the Bloomberg I was talking about, which is in this business College of Business hosted in the Econ and Finance department. Another databases is the video databases. Actually, this is also an important one because it basically stores videos and all kinds of media for different purpose. For example, for all the commercials for a company, it could be stored here in the databases, and whenever needed, they could pull it out to share with its partners or other, important connections. So for the rest of the PowerPoints or in the textbook, I'm gonna skip those because in a sense they are really old stuff. For example, for this one, the use of internet in research. Do I need to really talk about internet nowadays, right? We use internet all the time, and I believe you would realize, if you haven't yet, that internet is super important for you people to conduct research, right? Even though even if we don't conduct business research, if we just want to research into the most energy efficient dishwasher, right, offered in the market, then you go to internet. Most of the time, you could go to stores and ask the salesperson there, but it's probably more convenient and actually save you some dollars for the gas to stay home, surf the internet, and find out the answer. So internet is super important. Actually, for this course, I expect you to use the internet to do a lot of the search for our research prospectors. Intranet is basically the private data network within a company. Of course, this is not open to the outsiders. So if you work for a company, you have this private data network. All right. I think that's all I want to talk about in this chapter. It's a short chapter, but the main point is that data, information, and intelligence. You know the relationship among the three, and to a certain extent type of databases, and you also have some knowledge about the decision support system, in particular the customer relationship management. Okay, I'll see you next time.